the W4M Roundtable. Thank you to anybody for coming and just being a part of this. This is our extension for Women for Mentors for our building our community and really creating a support system around the incredible women that we have established this foundation to help. And so our whole goal is just to connect with each other, inspire, and build kind of that tribe that you can lean on and be a part of things with. Today, we are going to be talking about networking and soft skills, and it's all about who you know and just how you show up. And I have some great guests that I'm so excited to share, and Kelly is one of them. We happen to meet very organically in a very networking, soft skill based environment at a convention. And so, hi Kelly, thank you so much for being here. You could just introduce yourself and just let everybody know a little bit about you and what you do.
I'm Kelly Vass. I have been in the jewelry industry for the last 13 years. So I'm a general manager of a store in the Midwest. I kind of started at this job as a part-time helper. I had done many jobs. Often I think as women, especially when you have children, you're kind of floating between where can I fit this in and still raise a family. And in the old days, I didn't really honestly believe in myself that much. It really took me kind of having a few mentors along the way that I met through my volunteering that I did as a young mom when I had 5 kids and they were all in school. And I connected with other women, and some of them were already, I was a young mom, so some of the women that I met were older and already had established careers. So I had a couple in particular that just, I didn't believe in myself, and they said, Kelly, are you kidding me? Look at all these skills you have. You organize all these volunteers, you market your program, you run sport conferencing events and all kinds of stuff. So I started to think, you know what, you're right. These skills that I have are actually transferable to a job. So that was a real eye opener to me. And then one of the gentlemen that I kind of led up as the president of Sports Boosters offered me a job. And I thought, wow, I had no idea that what I do is sellable. Really, I'm just kind of an organizer of people. I think that's really what I do best. And I took a job working from home. Really didn't believe in myself, but guess what? I did it really well. I knew how to keep things organized. I worked in the marketing department and also the education department. So I set up trainings. It built my confidence. It was a software company, so I kind of learned a little more about computers. I kind of liked them anyway. Technology has always intrigued me. So I did that for a while. I then also, as a part-time thing, was an event planner. So I worked with a company where we did conferences for McDonald's and Starbucks and even some small businesses. So we kind of did large and small. Again, sort of dipping my toe into a little bit of travel, which I had not done before. So I kind of evolved and ended up being in a town where I raised my kids, and somebody said, hey, I'm looking to hire a part-time person at a jewelry store. And I said, sure, might as well try it. Instead of working from home, because I was getting kind of bored working from home. And I also at that time was doing a job where I actually had to commute to the city. So I had gone from one extreme to the other. So I was sick of working from home. I took a job where I commuted to Chicago every day. That was a 12-hour job. Too many things with my kids going on. It was just too difficult. But again, kind of boosted up my own self-confidence a bit because it was everyone in their 20s and I was at that point 42. So I needed a little bit of a boost to remind myself that I indeed can learn new things, and you're never too old to learn. You just have to be open to it. So even though that was a great experience, I just knew that was too much. So working in this little small town is the perfect fit. I really
Yeah.
kind of do all the things that I did before. Um, and it's all at State Street. So,
Yeah, that's
and I
amazing.
I haven't left. This is the longest I've ever actually stayed at a job. So I guess I
Oh, I
like
love it. Yeah, it sounds like you do. And
it.
I love too. I think your story is just it's really I think common for a lot of women. I mean, we talk about these topics a lot here on W4M Roundtable, and there's just so many stats out there about when women take a break or they step away from a career. Oftentimes, they're less likely to maybe try to step back in, or like we're kind of having where you kind of devalue what you do have to bring to the table, and don't think that it is transferable. And I love that so much, because like you said, here you're organizing all these things at the kids school,
Yeah,
and people are like, you're doing that better than the rest of us. Like that's
yeah,
commendable. That is something that is really important. And I think those soft skills, it's interesting is I don't know if we pay enough attention to them. Nowadays it's like everybody tries to be a little bit flashier, but there's sometimes those small things like being able to make sure, a bake sale was executed
right,
like very well from beginning to end, is the thing that you need the most out of a
right.
person. So I love your story about that and how you got to where you are. Because how many people are you about overseeing now?
There's a total of 19 of us. The
Oh,
owner would make it, I think, 20. So we have kind of being a retail jeweler, we've got, the shop, we've got all that avenues. We do everything in-house. So it's a lot of people. Some days it's more than I'd like to be overseeing, I won't lie. But I think um the more people that you're trying to kind of manage, because that's really all I can say. My personal real goal is I really like to make sure people are set up for success.
mhm.
So I really think it's important that every single department that's within our store, that they have what they need. So I often, we just had a fourth quarter kickoff and I tried to think of things I could give them that would be an aid to them going into the fourth quarter, which were just, little, like the hand lotion, tissues for when you just want to go in the corner and cry, you know. Um,
There's no crying in
um,
the jewelry store. That's where all the shiny
yeah,
pretty things are.
pointing when they were upset.
Yeah,
Or I gave them a couple of local gift certificates, and that was so that they could go treat themselves to lunch
yeah.
if they want to go buy themselves lunch during the fourth quarter. Um, Little things,
That
it
makes
didn't
people
even
feel
have to
good
be
and
that,
confident.
but
Yeah,
and then in terms of making sure that they all have the right, I gave all the salespeople organizers, calendars, so that they could learn to keep things more, in control and organized.
that's
It's
awesome.
just been me trying to make sure that everyone has what they need. If there's a class, if there's a tool, they want to go listen to a webinar, whatever. I'm here to help
Yeah.
as much as I can.
I love that. We have a really great question actually in the chat. It's what are, because this is obviously I think now that you've been able to transition some of your soft skills, into this position, you're probably looking for them in other people. So what do you think is the most underrated soft skill that women should focus on?
Um, Honestly, I think women are so resilient. Women in general can really bounce back. I'm going to be a little biased, better than men.
Yeah.
Uh, we are often put in situations where we have to make a quick decision and solve a problem. And I think women can pivot and can turn and can come up with a solution, because we don't want to be told no. We don't want to be told that doesn't work. Um, we are much more adept at finding a solution and fixing a problem. You know, I think that's just kind of our nature. That's what we like to do. And when we are pushed to the brink, we will come up with an answer. We'll
Yeah.
find a way out or find a solution or something.
I love that. I love that. And actually, so Karen, who was actually to be our other guest, but I think we're having some trouble with connectivity, did add, though, another caveat to that, just saying that, just also being authentic and personable,
Right.
and just always show up, which I
Right.
think that's right on target for what we're talking about. It's being
Correct.
present, showing up, I think also too, I would say even this is where networking ties in too, though, like forging connections, right? And keeping those going, like I could say, we met out and about at this conference, but we had to keep the connection going and bring it outside of that to make it so we could apply it to the real world,
Right.
because it's one thing
Right.
to go and meet people
Mhm.
and you can just let it go, but
Yeah.
that's a soft skill in itself, is building those relationships.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I definitely, I've tried to teach that to my kids because they're all in their 20s to 30s now, and they joke and tease me that I say everything is a networking opportunity, but it really, really is. Be who you are, and you never know who you're going to meet when you're out and about. So also be on your best version of yourself anytime that you can, especially if you're interacting. Um, Even if you're the person who's being, say, waited on, or you're at a, checkout station, I always use those opportunities. You just never know when you're going to meet someone. Or in my case, sometimes I'd say if I'm out and about, I might look at somebody and think, wow, I'd love to hire them. Like,
Yeah.
how do I get their information, because they are so positive and they're doing such a great job. I really need people in my industry that, kind of like what Karen was saying about being authentic and personable. I
Mhm.
need people that are going to connect with people and make their lives all about the relationships.
I love that. So would you say, because that's almost like, sounds like it's like somebody's hidden talent, and like their little
Yeah,
superpower basically is that they can
yeah,
show up, and like you just might have a simple interaction. Maybe they're checking you out, but you're like,
right,
oh, I would
right.
like to offer you a job. I mean,
Yep,
so
yep.
I guess when we think of that, people can just show up every day in their lives and just bring this,
Right.
and like who knows, opportunity might show up,
Yeah.
right?
Sometimes I think that, it's the times I've actually said it a few times, and it's actually been waitresses that I have the most experience with this with. And they kind of look at me like, well, how would I sell jewelry? And I'm like, trust me, you're nice, you're personable, you're genuine. That's all you need to do. And as long
Yeah.
as you can listen, because that's a huge skill. I don't really want somebody who talks a lot, which right now I feel like I'm talking a lot. So
Well, you're
probably
our
should
guest, so we want you to talk.
at some point. But it's definitely a skill that not a lot of people, eye contact, they
Mhm.
don't really understand how important that is. And then just being authentic, really, and being yourself, and, be helpful and be open to making a connection with someone.
Yeah, I think, I would assume, I think it's also getting harder for people to make that connection, I mean, I'm not any less guilty than anybody else. Like I work from home, and so,
Yep.
when I spend and couldn't go through a whole day and the most interaction I had was talking to my chickens, like that's not really working on those skills a whole lot. And I think that that's something that we're seeing a lot in mass amongst the population, is because we all have the capability. We can DoorDash, we can do all these things, and not have to interact with people. So we're not able to like exercise that muscle, which I would say was probably kind of what you were doing before, which was all those soft skills you were building on. You were exercising those muscles, and it brought you to where you are today, where you're able to see them in other people, which that I think that must be so fun to be able to recognize those little gems, in other
Right.
people.
Then I look at all this as opportunities to support other women in particular.
Mhm.
Because I do think they sometimes have the same reaction that I had when somebody said to me, "Oh, what you're doing is, so sought after, and you should be out in the working force." And I just didn't believe it. I didn't
Yeah.
believe that the little bit that I was doing would actually be valuable. And, I would always downplay, well, how much, some places would say, "How much money would you like to make an hour?" And I'd be like, I don't know. Like, can you
Yeah.
afford to pay me $10 an hour? Like, I remember just always lowballing myself big time. And I just didn't believe in the capabilities that I did actually have.
So what do you think? What feedback did you get that was particularly helpful to help you make that connection in your brain to go, oh, there might be something actually to
Right.
this. Like maybe this is like an actual strength of mine.
Right. Well, I mean, I was making schedules for people, that's transferable to a job. I didn't realize, I mean, I was very organized. I would make lists and I would make, spreadsheets in my version of spreadsheets, which I don't really think I was using Excel, but I can't remember what I was using. Or I also love to do graphic arts. So I
Mhm.
used to make all my kids, birthday invitations, and I would use something called Printmaster, which is silly to even say now because it's so far gone. But I then moved on to the kids' school and I did the newsletters for the school. Things that I just learned on my own because I enjoyed it and it was fun. And it wasn't until I met other people in the workforce that they were like, you should be doing this for a living, and I used to use Photoshop a little bit. I definitely probably couldn't do it now because I'm so out of the loop of learning all the new bells and whistles, but I do use something called Canva, which I feel like is for marketing for dummies. It really is
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
easy
Love Canva.
and
Makes it
has
easy.
you can use. So it's really just turning those things that kind of came naturally to me into understanding how to apply them in the workforce. That's the part where I needed somebody to be like, okay, you do this. Well, then you could do this,
Mm.
um, doing slideshows. I didn't really know that knowing how to do PowerPoint was, you know, really something other than me. I sometimes substitute taught or led my kids' groups that we would do stuff like that. So, all the things I didn't understand that really are marketable and usable in a business setting.
I agree. And I think this also encourages me to try to think when I'm out in the world and connecting with other people to just even encourage people when I see them,
Right.
doing something extra well, or they were extra personable, or, they made that experience great. And just to point out those things as well
Yeah.
to them so that they
Yeah.
can have that moment too of connecting the dots and realizing that
Right.
this is stuff that has value that they're
Right.
adding. Well, with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Jenny. Jenny has just some different questions and some stats and stuff. And I appreciate you, Kelly, bearing with us and letting us just kind of pick on you alone. Yeah. So
Welcome. It's my
take it
pleasure.
away, Jenny.
Yeah, sorry I joined late, but we all made it for the most part. So I missed a little bit of the first part of what you're talking about, Kelly, but definitely giving a lot of great advice so far. I had a couple stats I was going to throw out. One of them relates directly to something you just said, actually, which is 85% of jobs are filled through networking. So
Mhm.
thinking about what does that tell us about how we should be kind of approaching career development? Like you said, you talk to your kids about the
Oh,
the
yeah.
fact that they might be interacting with someone important when they're out in the world.
That's correct. What I have learned, it's really all about who you know and who you connect to. I hate to say it like that, but it is so true. Because luckily for my kids, I'm able to utilize some of who I know to introduce them kind of the right direction. The other thing I tell them is, you know, a lot of people still tend to shy away from, like my daughter just started a new job. She's 25. It's downtown Chicago, and it's actually my husband's company that he works for. And he got her the job. And so they were doing something where they were both going to be at the same thing. And she was nervous about it. She's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to talk to people, whatever. And I said, you know what? Pretend like you just don't know anybody and you don't know anything about them. You're going to go and you're going to be who you are. You're a go-getter. You're a problem solver. And I said, and if you do see your father, remember your peers. So even though he's technically higher up in the food chain than her, I said, look who he's talking to. Because I said, don't be foolish and not use those connections. So when she was there, she did. She went over, and sure enough, it was like the president of the company, you know, and he said, oh, is this your daughter? And he said, why, yes, it is. And so whenever you're at an event, and I just did this here, I hosted an after hours, the store did, it was our 40th celebration in business, and I had the mayor of the town here. And I thought it would be cute if I introduced my little watch battery young man who's a junior in high school. I took the mayor in the back and I said, hey, let's go introduce you to David. He's a good person to know, David. You ever get into trouble, you know the mayor, you know? So it sounds silly, but when you're at any kind of networking event, like don't be afraid if it says it's the president or whatever. Go up and introduce yourself. You know, they're just a human being just like you. So don't be intimidated. Just go right up. You know what? It's not going to hurt. And if something doesn't go 100%, well, they might remember you more that way too. So nothing's really a negative in my mind. So yeah.
Yep. No, I definitely agree. That actually, if you don't mind me sharing a personal anecdote about myself, that reminded me of when I was in kindergarten. We were selling raffle tickets, and I am a terrible salesperson, but apparently when I was in kindergarten, I was pretty good. I walked up to the principal of the school and I tried to sell him a raffle ticket, and he thought it was so funny, and he actually bought a ticket. But he remembered me throughout the entirety of my elementary school career because I was a small 5-year-old who, for some reason, thought if I'm selling a raffle ticket, I'm going to the top.
Yeah, I think we all have to remember to channel that part of yourself that is a child, and you have that naive fearlessness, I'll call it. You have to remember that, you know what, you can do whatever, you can be whoever you want to be that day. You know, I used to work from home where I answered the phone, and it was for a lot of important people, you know, and it made me uncomfortable. But then I thought, wait a minute, here I am in my pajamas. They can't see me. I could be, you know, the Queen of Sheba. I could be whatever I wanted. I just have to project that in my voice. And they don't know, you know, so it's the same kind of thing when you're networking. Don't hold yourself back because you're afraid you're too much of a peon on the food chain. Like, go introduce yourself. You know, you're going to stick out more than the other people because you're taking a little leap of faith and you're kind of showing that I'm proud of who I am, and I'd like to make your acquaintance.
I really like that. You can be whoever you want to be today. So even if yesterday or earlier today you weren't totally feeling it, you go to a networking event in the evening, you can kind of turn it around. So I really like that. One other stat that I wanted to mention and just kind of get your take on this, I think this is a really interesting question, is emotional intelligence accounts for 58% of job performance. So, but how could a person identify and grow some of the things they might be a little bit weaker in when it comes to, say, soft skills or that emotional intelligence?
So I will tell you one of my biggest tricks, and I learned it when I was a substitute teacher. My least favorite subject is math. And at the time, I had several of my kids in the school. It was a private school, and I substituted anything from kindergarten through 8th grade. So I'll never forget one of the times it was a math class, and I never said no because I just jumped in. And the trick is, yeah, you've always got the teacher's manual that you can fall back on. However, they do math in really different ways now than they
Hmm.
used to, and they kind of work both sides of the equations, and they do all this stuff, and um threw me for a total loop. And I thought, oh my Lord, like what am I going to do? Because kids are smart. So my approach was, we came to teach the lesson. And instead of me actually teaching it, what I did, I had a little bit of knowledge of knowing who were maybe a couple of the smarter kids in the class because they were my children's friends. So I asked for someone to come up and we did the equations on the board up front, and they basically did it together. And so all I did was say, who'd like to try that problem? And of course they, raising their hand, and I called them up and I'm like, let's go. How would you get started with that? I had no idea of what we were doing, but the
Hmm.
kids self-regulated. Oh, wait, he made a mistake. He needed to do this. And he was like, oh, yeah. So it became like a group teaching moment. And at the end of it, I was like, phew, they did not put me out because, man, I would have been like, I don't know how to do this. Are you crazy? I'm the kind of math person who I round everything in my head, but I can't tell you how I got the answer. So that's the first time that I learned that. Um, and then also, I think with emotional intelligence, I think you sort of read the room. I'd have to say that I always personally like to surround myself with people who I consider smarter than myself. If I see someone who I think, wow, they're really doing a good job, um, I might say, hey, would you do that? Because you do that way better than I do. And you'd be great at, that position. So I definitely think your emotional intelligence, if you think you're the smartest person, you're probably wrong. I mean, there's a lot of intelligence, and I think everybody has their little part and piece. So I think to learn to recognize when someone does a skill better than you can learn from them. You can observe what they're doing. You can say, hey, can you show me how you did that? But never think that you're too old to learn, or that, oh, I know this better than them. There's always going to be somebody who comes along and probably knows it
Hmm.
better than you. So instead of taking offense, open yourself up to learning something from them. And that's a much better, you'll end up making a nice connection with that person and then move on from there and then become your own network.
Hmm. So instead of looking at everything as kind of a competition,
Yes.
that you have to be the best at, like you said, kind of
Yes.
reading the room and
Yep.
getting, basically adopting the idea that, the strength around you is still strength that helps you pretty much.
It ultimately, if you can build a strong team, and if you can, seek out people that are really good at something, that's perfect. I mean, I know, again, an example, my daughter, she's had lots of other jobs, but she doesn't know Excel all that well. So she said, I'm doing great at this new job, Mom, but there's one guy who just keeps beating me out at Excel. And I said, well, go make friends with him. Go see if he can give you some pointers. Go introduce yourself. And you might learn something from him because maybe he knows some shortcuts you don't know. And she did do that. And now she's getting it, and she got herself some little cheat sheet things that you can buy on Amazon. So I think instead of being enemies, or like, being offended that, oh, they're better than me at that, no, turn it around and see what opportunity is there and how you can actually go learn and partner with somebody else, because you
Hmm.
always need those different cogs in the wheel. So everybody has a place.
I totally agree. I think I've got one last question. This is, you can talk about any idea that comes to mind, but what is a like really fun or interesting or different kind of networking event that you've ever attended? Maybe something that was a little out of the box, or maybe even shopping in a store ended up being a networking event.
Um, oh gosh. Well, let me think. I'd have to say when I even met Ashley, I mean, I'm in a place that's, my work oriented. And I wasn't really thinking about women's issues, although I have been on many different committees. It is kind of, I'd say, a passion of my life to make sure I'm mentoring as much as I can or supporting other women, but we just happened to start talking, and we could have sat down at the table, we were having a drink. I could have just not, had a conversation. I could have just said a friendly hello. And we just started talking and somehow ended up with this discussion of how you came to be, where you are type of situation. So that was probably an unusual one that I can think of, at least in recent memory. But a lot of times I've gone with my husband to his company stuff, and I find it fascinating to meet new people in a different industry. And so I love to hear what they're doing, and I kind of introduce kind of what I'm doing and that I used to be in technology. That's all super intriguing. That's the part I probably miss the most about being in technology, that um, learning about all these new things that are coming about is something I definitely miss. Not that jewelry is not entertaining, but um, I love to go to different places actually where I might not know anyone. It's kind of a nice challenge every once in a while if I have that feeling of fear that, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this. I do it anyway. So
Well, yeah, that's great advice. Do it anyway.
yeah.
I love that. I think you honestly, just to wrap up the whole thing together, I think you hit a really important nail on the head, which I think is just, pushing outside your box. And when you get to meet people that are in different fields and industries, and that's where I think also too you get to really have your eyes open to what you're capable of doing, and how honestly it works in the world. And that's really where the best connections come from, because that person might know somebody that's related to what you're doing, and that's where you can really start to build that community, which is it's just kind of like the whole goal. It's what we're all here for, and that's one of the reasons why we have this organization and have this roundtable series, is so we can just try to keep building that momentum and bringing more people together and make it a place where people feel like they can have and establish those relationships. Because I mean, it's wonderful when you can see other people succeed. You will receive success in it, and it just kind of, what goes around comes around. They just keep it going. So Kelly, thank you so much for bearing with us today, and our little wild journey we've been on webinaring today with our new platform. Um, it's been really great to have you. So I really appreciate you coming. And for Karen, who we didn't get to talk to, but we'll just have to have her on another time. And thank you so much, Karen, for your efforts to be here today too. And so that's all we have for today. I just want to remind everyone, if you want to connect with us, womenformentors.com. And then Kelly, is there any way people could connect with you if they'd like to reach out, or wanna connect with you in any way?
You can find me on LinkedIn is probably the best spot. So just send me a message. I'm happy to connect, happy to help anybody in any way that I can. And hopefully everyone will just be the best person they can be for the day.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you, Ginny, for co-hosting with me today. And I just want to encourage everybody after our conversation today to just go out there and keep working and recognizing your own soft skills. And as you're networking out in the world, don't forget to encourage other people in theirs. And then we can all rise together.